Okay, so I think I should be live now. My voice is going to be a little bit more echoey than you may be used to, and that is because I recently had the carpet removed. So most of my room is empty. There's not a lot to absorb the sound, but hopefully that's not too much of an issue, and I'll see if I can get it sorted out later. Now, for the tournament today, it should be fairly small. I think most players actually can't make it today. So we may only see 2 rounds of this tournament. But nevertheless, it should be a fairly good test of the rules. And specifically the forest rules, which we will be testing today. So it states that defensive formations, and actually I think I can show that up on the screen blocker right now, so let's do that. So it states that defensive formations can't be set up in the forest, can't move into the forest, can't stay in it outside of combat, so no loitering in there. You don't need to attack groups that are moving through the forest, but if an army is using it defensively, you must still advance. And then after that, it's just a little bit of clarification. So more or less, it means you can use the forest however you want, as long as you are using it to, as long as the way you're using it defensively isn't abusive. But everything else is more or less fair game, and we'll be seeing if the players today actually find any edge cases that really break the rules here. So there we go. I think the participants are ready. If you're watching on the VOD as usual, feel free to skip ahead and we will be diving right on in. So let me just message the players real quick and we can get started. So I'm thinking, since there are so few players today, I'm actually going to have them wait for me to cast their games. I also see a Neckbed in chat. I'll get to you in a second. Okay, cool. So the players have been notified and we'll dive right on in. There's only one rule you care about, and it's double necrophex getting unbanned. It would be pretty interesting. I think compared to something like a Steam Tank, necrophex is probably scarier. And the fact that Steam Tanks are limited to 1 makes me feel like at least things are consistent, but I've never really seen a problem with double necrophex myself. So cool. I'm going to host a lobby. And I will call it Forest Tournament and invite the players. Okay. And whoops, it looks like I accidentally set up the lobby incorrectly. So let me just change that real quick. Let's see, host battle, there we go. But cool, I hope everyone's doing fine today. I'll go ahead and show the bracket. We have an interesting map pool, to say the least. Actually, it's all forest maps. Hey, human boy, happy you could tune into the stream today. It's too bad you couldn't make it to the actual tournament, but at least we have you here. I'll go ahead and invite Park Map, and we will wait for them to show up. So yeah, for those tuning in right now, the current Forest Rules test is looking to see if there are any gaps in the in sort of what's been laid out. It allows a lot of things. For example, you can kite your entire army into the forest, as long as you don't set up a defensive formation. Air quotes, because that's sort of something that's more loose. We'll see how that goes. Ice Power, happy to have you in chat too. And as soon as we get Park Map in here, we should be able to get started. For now though, I'll be able to just chill, talk with chat. Feel free to message, I don't know, ask any questions about the rules, any potential abuses that you're worried about. I personally feel like there isn't anything too problematic. There's a few situations where we might end up seeing huge fights in the forest, which is definitely not preferable, but I don't know if it gets into like full forest box camping territory. That's sort of what I wanted to test out with the tournament today. Glad to see the envelope getting pushed on forest a bit. Yeah, it's a small tournament. I wish we could have gone more players, but sadly, well, I don't know. People could just be busy. They might not want to test out these rules specifically. I know the map pool isn't super fun because not everyone enjoys forests. But here we go. We do have both players in now. I'll go ahead and change the scores. And hopefully we can get some useful data out of this test. If not, maybe I'll play some like quick battles or something. Or not quick battles, but potentially, what is it called? A ranked ladder. Bugling fun. There we go. Yeah, maybe I'll try some ranked ladder later and test out some possible forest abuse, but we'll have to see. I could potentially host more of these tournaments too. That's also in the plans, and I really want to get the forest rules in a good place before the next DLC drops. That's the main goal that I'll be aiming for today. Cyber Pansy, hello, and CJ, welcome. Happy to have you in chat. You would play if it wasn't for work. In general, for everyone in chat right now, would you be able to make it if these tournaments were done a little bit later in the day? I would be fine doing that for the next one, just to make sure that we have more players. I've seen like 3 people message me today that work has sort of been making it where they couldn't come. I know it cuts it a bit close, because if you go too late, then everyone in Europe is gonna be in bed and they won't be able to attend. That is true. US time zones, yeah. I guess I can just host more tournaments. That's not really a problem. I think most of this week I'm actually a lot more available than last week because of all the renovation stuff. But now I'm finally free. It's amazing. Oh man, this room though is so echoey without carpet. I'm hearing myself just from all sides. It's sort of weird. Maybe I'll get some foam padding. You love the streams? Thanks for all the timestamps. Hey, happy to hear it. The timestamp feedback has been or timestamps in general have been very well received. I found the just it seems to work out pretty well, especially since my streams are insanely long. I will there's like huge gaps between battles, so I think it's nice. Forest camping really rubs you the wrong way. Oh yeah, it's I think it's pretty annoying. The problem right now is that I feel like in the current rule set, most people just sort of deploy away from the forest, but some people will use the forest defensively, and it's sort of unclear whether or not it's forest camping. Hopefully with this rule set, it sort of levels the playing field where everyone knows that they can more or less use the forest as they wish. And then that way you don't have to worry as much about accidentally breaking the forest camping rules based on however the admin is feeling, or their thoughts on what camping means exactly. In this case, it comes down to what people think defensive formations are, which is a bit vague, but I think it more or less gets to the point. If you can show that you're not defensive, then you can use the forest. By the way, Enticity, what are your camera settings? Let's see, my camera is a Microsoft HD camera of some sort that I borrowed from my dad. I don't know anything about it. I'm just using basically default settings. Oh, you mean Warhammer? I see. Yes, Warhammer debug settings. I think I sped up the camera movement. God, I can't believe that didn't click. I sped up the movement speed a bit and the scrolling on the Z axis. I think I slowed that down. But I would have to check. But you know, you can more or less go with whatever you're comfortable with. I would very much recommend you actually change the settings though, to make sure that it feels right. Let's see. Enticity is casting from heaven. I don't know where that's coming from. Yeah. I'm aware. Game settings, yes. Camping has always been a great and effective tactic, literally in every game where it applies. Never understood the butt hurt of players who fall prey to it. I think most of the things that they don't enjoy there is, oh, this? I see. Yeah, it sort of checks out. It's a little bit too hot and humid here for heaven, I would say, but close enough. Have you guys watched The Good Place? I don't know if they have the same aesthetic, but I don't know, that thought just came up. But anyways, I think forest camping in general isn't like super something to get worked about, but I think the thing that bothers most people is that with the rules as is in the banner rules, it says no forest camping. Yeah, just period. When ready. Man, I feel like Terran having to tell the players to ready up. Anyways, the forest camping as is, people will have different opinions on what forest camping is, and people who are more conservative on it will generally feel like it feels like your opponent is breaking the rules. They're doing something that you wouldn't do, and then that doesn't feel very great. It can feel pretty unfair. So I can see how people get frustrated with that. But heading on into the game. Oh no, I forgot to change my camera settings to be all smooth and glidey. But I can do that as soon as we load in. And we'll see how this goes. Now, Altdorf Outskirts is a map with many patchy forests all around, with a huge forest along the flank, with tons of vanguard positions in the back. This has a lot of potential for testing out forest camping rules, because what ends up happening, let's get it real smooth today. Ooh, yeah, look at that. So what happens is that these patchy forests here, you want to know, can I hide my caster in these forests? Can I deploy units in there? Will that count as forest camping? How about artillery and so on? And in the current rule set that we are testing today, our greenskin player will only be able to deploy half of their troops in the forest at any point in time if they are playing defensively. Same with the lizardmen. And knowing that, let's get into the armies for the greenskins. We are seeing forest goblins, spider riders, actually quite a few, and gold chevroned. The melee and defense stats will be higher, and that means they can stick in combat for just a little bit longer. Probably better against skinks, but they'll still lose to Saurus warriors. As for the front line, big guns, very nice anti-large greenskin infantry, with the usual skirmisher core actually going up to 6 skirmishers, with the forest goblin spider riders, the mangy marauders with AP, and the rest probably looks like all spider riders. Cool. The Lord and Hero choice, of course, Grom the Paunch with his usual kit, cutting out the Axe of Grom, so a little bit less damage than usual. Brain Burst of Vindictive Glare, and I believe the slow spell on this goblin. Yep, Gork will fix it. Will be slowing down any mobility of the lizardmen. Now on the lizardmen side, it is going to be 3 Pterodon riders up in the sky. Greenskins generally having a hard time versus the air, but this time with a lot of skirmishers may do okay. Park map has also brought what appears to be 4 skink units. 1, the Arwar Red Crested, some javelins and some normals, some Saurus. Nothing too crazy on the infantry front. Just a few skirmishers, and what is this? Looks like a Stegodon and a solar engine. Oh, and another Stegodon. Cool, so double Stegodon. Very strong single entity power. Krokgar, presumably with Hand of the Gods, indeed, and his mobility. The Skink Priest of Beasts, of course, with the Manticore summon. And the Flock of Doom. All very, very standard spells when it comes to the lore of beasts. So some pretty interesting builds to start out with. The Lizardmen don't have... they have a pretty strong single entity squad, and in this case, they will be stronger than the Greenskins, as the Greenskins, instead of opting for an Arachnarok Spider, they've gone heavier on the infantry and heavier on the skirmishers. Now, the early game, we are going to see these skirmishers taking the forest position to get a few shots in on the Lizardmen forces. They have a pretty nice advantage here, because their shots are going to be blocking the archers. And this is actually a fairly good position for the Greenskins. Of course, this is also legal play because these forces are skirmishing and they aren't using it defensively, as this would be classified as kite. I see someone in chat saying, let's see here. Do I think poison is too strong? Well, it depends on what your definition of too strong is. Do I think they could receive a nerf without it making a big impact? Probably. Do I think they need a nerf for the game to still be fun? No, probably not. Yeah, summons do not count towards single entity cap, at least in banner rules, as far as I know. Now, taking a look at the game, we are continuing to see just the skirmishing play out. And both sides are trading actually sort of asymmetrically. The Greenskin forces are doing fairly good for themselves, having accrued probably like 200 golds worth of value in pure damage. But the Lizardmen, they do win out in the fact that they don't really have to worry as much about the... They don't have to worry as much about their single entities getting shot up. If these Greenskin forces run out of ammunition, we would see that the single entities, the Stegodon, should be able to do much, much better against just Grom. The Greenskin forces, they really will be relying on their big guns to finish off those Stegodons if these skirmishers go down or run out of ammunition. And even though this is a fairly nice trade, it might not be the most optimal. We'll have to see. Classic Solar Engine too, getting some shots off on some trees, getting completely stopped in its tracks. And skirmishers look like they are actually moving up, poking away at the Goblin Shaman over here up in front of the Greenskin forces. That is correct. The Lizardmen technically don't have to attack the Greenskin skirmish forces, but the Lizardmen do have to worry about attacking some sort of force. And right now we are seeing the Pterodons are moving up to attack and actually getting a fairly nice position right off the bat. They are they basically have free reign here because all the Greenskin skirmishers are in the forest. So far, all legal play. The Lizardmen Pterodons just poking away, and both sides are just trying to get as much value as they can. The Greenskins, they haven't really taken too much damage on their skirmishers, which is nice. But if you look at the total damage they've done, it's sort of been not a lot, really. Just a single unit of Skinks being a little bit more beat up than usual. Whereas the Greenskins, a very expensive unit, the Ache Peak Loonies do have some rock drops delivered directly on top of them. And that brings them dangerously low to their HP threshold. So that's going to be for their Fanatics. If that is lost, that essentially wipes off 700 gold off of the map. But I'm not sure how many of these Pterodons still have rock drops. In the meantime, though, they are getting shooed away by a couple of these Forest Goblin Spider Riders. They do fairly nice damage, and they can keep pace with the Pterodon riders, thanks to both sides having poison. Taking a look at the speeds, we are seeing, actually, wow, with the Wolf Rider archers at 90 and 80 speed with the Spider riders, they're going to easily keep pace with the Pterodon riders, and we do see they do begin getting routed off. However, if you look at the balance of power real quick, look at that. The Lizardmen are surprisingly pulling out ahead. And this is purely because we are now seeing the ammunition finally running out for these skirmishing forces. For the melee, both sides are sort of just ignoring each other at the moment. And I'm wondering if it would be beneficial for one of them to advance. I'm not sure which one. Perhaps they just want to focus more on the skirmishing, but if both players are deciding not to advance on each other, it usually means that one side is making an incorrect choice. I will hold by that fact until I am proven otherwise. And here we go. The Lizardman forces do begin creeping up a little bit more, primarily outside of the forest. And the Greenskin forces, with just a single unit of big guns, hiding in the patchy forests here. And that's going to be about it. The Greenskin forces continue to push forwards. The Pterodons mostly shut down at this point. But if we take a look at the major threats for the Lizardmen, we're going to see 2 Feral Stegodons at full HP, completely unhindered. Another Flock of Doom does drop, though. This does lower the Winds of Magic pool for the Lizardmen. But with how many of those that have dropped, it's likely that we'll still be seeing 2 Manticores this game. Who can summon Vargulfs? Well, the vampire accounts, no less. There is one of the lords summons Vargulfs instead of Manticores. I think it's one of those dragon lords that is not a blood dragon lord. Now over here, some Skink cohort javelins. You do get caught by some mobility, but that's only 300 gold value. Solar Engine though, now beginning to run low on ammunition. And if you look at how much damage it's done to Grom, it actually has not hit him at all. So Grom feeling pretty safe now, actually advancing directly towards the Solar Engine. He might be in for a bit of a beating, but no, classic Solar Engine. No, actually, not classic. It does land its hit, not aiming at Grom. It's the Orc Shaman instead. Another Vindictive Glare drops, but it is slightly less effective against armor and only tickles the Solar Engine, but with the presence of Grom, it does decide to retreat. And now both forces are advancing in on top of each other. The Lizardmen looking to set up their position on top of this hill, but that will only give a minor advantage. And they have given up the mobility game to the Greenskins, as they only do have 2 Chameleon Skink units to really force back all of these skirmishers. So at risk of being surrounded, it looks like Parkmap has positioned his Skinks in the backside so that they can stop any potential charges into his more expensive units. Some good position, but the Greenskin forces, they are moving in now, and it looks like a pretty vicious round begins. The big guns are expected to win out in a lot of these engagements, but with Stegodon support, it could go either way. Red Crested Skink still at very high HP too, and we're going to take a quick look at where Grom is, the Greenskin Lord. Here we go, plowing through these Red Crested Skinks, getting insane damage already. But remember, he does not have the Axe of Grom. There is a potential for the 2 Stegodons to gang up on top of him. The center line of big guns gets pretty damaged too, I think by a rock drop. And that means that the Greenskin lines, they're going to be taking a bit of damage. Now, the area with Grom is still doing fairly well. Manticore Summon will be able to support, and with Krokgar coming in, this could potentially be a pretty bad situation for the Greenskins. It really depends on how much of a beating Grom takes here. If you look, his Lucky Banner, I believe, has recently worn off, unless he had just activated it right now. We're going to double check. And there we go. We are seeing Scroll of Shielding procs, but he does not have the Lucky Banner at the moment. So he's going to be a little bit squishier. And taking a look at the Manticore, it's getting some pretty nice damage. Krokgar, though, actually getting bogged down by the 8 peak loonies. Can't get that much damage. Vindictive Glare fires out the Soul Engine and misses. But taking a look at the Lizardmen backlines, we are seeing all of the Skinks getting surrounded. Saurus Warriors on the verge of breaking. And the Greenskins are looking to secure a pretty nice mobility force. But will it matter against the Lizardmen blob, some single entities, some Pterodon riders, and Krokgar, especially with Grom going down. You're gonna need a lot of big guns to bring down a force like this. Grom, though, in a miracle, does manage to escape, dives right in onto the Skink Priest of Beasts. Now this is very big because only one Manticore has been dropped. So Grom taking out essentially 800 gold of value by taking out this priest. But will it be fast enough? It looks like the priest, ever the slippery lord, does manage to escape, and Grom instead dives into some Saurus warriors. Instead, Manticore does get routed out as it does crumble away. And there we go, Skink Priest of Beasts gets dived in on again. And this time it does look like he will be routing out. And with so much mobility for the Lizardmen, it's likely he'll get chased off. Hand of the Gods does drop onto Grom, gets a little bit less damage than I would have expected. Perhaps some of the missiles hitting the hill instead. That's going to be pretty rough because Grom, he does still essentially have about full HP if this game does go on long enough. And likely it will, just because single entities do have a pretty hard time at clearing out infantry. The solar engine, though, clipping Grom, fire damage, more effective. But one of the Stegodons is going to get routed out. This is one of the most expensive units left for the Lizardmen. And with this gone, the potential for Grom to cycle charge the rest of the single entities in this game is definitely going to be pretty high. Vindictive Glare drops on the Stegodon. That just barely routes it off. And the Goblin says, I'm done here. Just packs up and leaves right after that Glare. He's been spamming it out the entire game, but getting hit by the Stegodons and potentially some overcast damage, giving him a bit of a hard time. Skink Priest is now getting chased off. There are some mobile Pterodons that look like they will be coming into support, but they will have to sacrifice their lives for the potential of saving this guy. Although it looks like Grom actually decides to disengage instead. Whoops, a bit of a zoom in. To support these troops, he wants to give leadership here. But it does mean that another Manticore could drop. That could be really bad. But if we look at the balance of power, it seems like the Greenskins are taking a pretty nice lead. So here we go. Grom, he does dive in. Krokgar does land a pretty nasty hit, though. Grom has been on the verge of death for a lot of this game. A second hit and potentially a comeback for the Lizardmen. If Grom goes down here, he's going to just barely squeeze through. His leadership does stabilize, so he's not routing. And miraculously, Grom does manage to escape. Although perhaps not too miraculously, he does have very high mass, which helps him exit these situations a lot more often than you would initially expect. And that does mean he will continue to regenerate, although his heal cap does creep closer to his current HP. He can't support in this battle either. But perhaps he's not really needed here. Just a solar engine does not have the best combat stats. This Stegodon is on the verge of routing off. There's no Pterodons to really support here. Other Stegodon very nicely getting chased off the map by Biblington. And wow, look at that. I think a solar engine shot just nails that Orc Shaman. He's going to be off the battlefield, but he might come back since his leadership is actually already fairly high. Grom, cycle charging too. This is very nice play, as it does mean that he will be able to apply his 90 charge bonus, which is absolutely insane. And there we go, the single entities for the Lizardmen getting completely bogged down and chased off the battlefield. Now it is just going to be Krokgar, and unless there is an insane Hand of the God snipe on Grom, I don't think the Lizardmen forces are going to be able to win it. Park map feels the same way. Biblington takes the first victory here in game number 1 on Altdorf Outskirts. Not too much forest play today. It was primarily just in the skirmishing phase of the game. And all in all, it seemed like a pretty fair and even game. Taking a look at Krokgar, who did okay, but not amazingly. Actually doing better than Grom, who very closely got sniped out for a lot of the game. The 8-peak loonies also not doing too well, despite getting the Fanatics onto some Saurus warriors. In the end, I think they only lose to 1 Fanatic bomb, which usually doesn't fully pay for themselves. Now, the Stegodons were pretty scary, but they did go down in the end, same with the solar engine. And I think just being able to bog down all of the monsters in these big guns really paid off. Boy, oh boy, did it. just taking a look at that damage value. So that's game number 1. On to game number 2. GG. We'll see what our players here decide to pick. So hard to contest map control against spider riders. Indeed. Usually the best counter skirmish play are chameleon skinks for the lizardmen. But if you take a look at some of the games Falcon has played, he does go for Mazda Mundi, nets down a couple of the skirmishers, and then hits them with a ton of AoE. Although it seems like it could be inefficient with how cheap these skirmishers are, with how much battlefield control you gain, and with how much damage potential they have, doing that is actually a fairly good option. So I would highly recommend it. And in general, that will play out okay, especially if they have a lot of forests that they are using for cover. Now, the next map is going to be Pillar of Bone. And with this map, there aren't actually too many forests here. But one of the things that is actually fairly important on this map, that there are a couple forest positions that could potentially be problematic. Under some rule sets, if you don't describe it properly, there are some pretty cheesy positions you can take up on the Pillar of Bone. In this case, though, with this rule set, you are in the forest if you are completely surrounded by it. Just because, well, you know, there are some maps with essentially, like, you know, groves in the forest, just patches of flat land without trees. And obviously camping those positions are fairly cheesy, and we want to make sure that isn't allowed. Dinos should maybe have pushed in sooner, perhaps, but if you take a look at the damage of these skirmishers, I don't think the dinos really played, I don't think that like the long skirmish game really was too punishing for the lizardmen. I think more so their inability to snipe out Grom was probably their bigger downside. And if the solar engine had focused on Grom instead of the skirmishers, I think it could have played out better. Ooh, some cheering for Park Map. The underdog currently down 1 game, but a fellow Italian brother apparently coming into chat. We'll see if he's able to pull it back. If he does win this, we will be diving into the ace match. And for the matchup today, it is going to be Beastmen banning Norska and the Vampire Counts. So Beastmen, a pretty risky pick nowadays, given that they can be sniped, or not sniped out, but they are vulnerable on the single entity front. Despite having Minotaurs and single entity heroes, they don't have big powerhouses like many of the other factions, really only able to dump a couple thousand gold into single entities, or going for giants, who are, of course, very vulnerable to missiles. Ah, okay. Oh, your Italian brother, not your fellow Italian brother. You are Dutch. I guess I should have known, given that your name is the Dutch flavor. But yeah, so far we're seeing some very good games. Well, just a single game. That last one did last a decent amount of time with the long skirmishing phase. Some cheering for Biblington, Zypher in chat. Welcome. We'll see how this goes. I'm thinking it's probably going to be a bit scary for the Beastmen here. Usually, Chaos will take a lot of missile cavalry, or rather horsemen and horse masters, which does quite a bit of damage to giants. To see is Italian. Oh man, that would be interesting. Although I do live in the cold winter wastes of Canada, although it is fairly hot right now. Now back to the matchup. Yeah, lots of skirmish cavalry for Chaos. Basically a guarantee. They could go for many different lores of magic too. And on the single entity front, I would expect them to win. Shaggoths should trade fairly effectively against giants, just due to their mobility. With enough micro, they should be able to survive fairly well. used to do the same thing with Marcus Wolfhart. He's just not good enough. Let's see here. Not sure exactly what you're referring to, but we'll move on. So, yeah, on the Beastmen side, their infantry generally is fairly weak too. And really, I think the biggest advantage I would give Beastmen, oh man, it's gonna be tough. I guess the biggest advantage is that they do have a lot of cheaper cavalry. They could potentially secure a fairly nice mobility advantage using that. Potentially using some dogs to catch out the chaos skirmishers. And I'm wondering if chaos is going to bring a lot of chaos cavalry here, as they are very highly armored. The only downside is that they are extremely expensive, but I would imagine they can trade fairly well against Beastmen cavalry with a little bit of support. But we'll see as we dive on into this game. I am not generally not much of a chaos player myself, so I'm interested to see what builds these players decide to field. Potentially another kite style of game, as both sides could field a lot of skirmishers, with chaos bringing a little bit more, or potentially some heavy rushes. The map distance is very close, so any artillery-based build will have to worry here. Sigor forest camping engage, potentially. With the rule set, you can just throw a Sigor in the forest. That is perfectly legal under the set, but you can only move half of your forces into the forest. So you do have to be a bit careful here. Now, it looks like in terms of battle cheesiness, players are going for a fairly straight up game. For the forces of chaos, we do see 2 manticores with some very red wings when you zoom out, apparently. I was not aware of that, but there you go. Some dragon ogres, a rarely seen unit nowadays. They do fairly well against cavalry and large units, but just a unit that you generally don't see a lot. I'm happy to see them come into play. A lot of cheap chaos infantry too, a little bit of lag also. That's a bit unfortunate, but taking a look, we are seeing 5 chaos marauders, 2 chaos warriors, and 1 mirror guard. But park map has dropped from the game. So that's very unfortunate, as it does mean that both sides are going to see the builds of each other. But we can simply remake the game with the same builds. I'll see if I can re-invite park map. Will be same builds. So there we go. Go ahead and resend an invite. A few technical difficulties today, but nothing too extreme. At least my stream is still running. I know I've had one time where the stream just started dying completely. So it's completely understandable. Let's see what's going on in chat then. Yes, that is right. So I think the Sigor in the forest, that would actually be really interesting. I'm a bit disappointed we aren't getting to see that. Because yeah, there is a $5 prize on whoever can abuse the tournament rules the most. Yeah, whoever can most effectively show the cheesiness that this rule set allows can get a prize, but it seems in this case it is going to be both sides mostly rushing each other. Bad Wi-Fi signal in the forest? It seems so. Yeah, I guess you know, on Altdorf outskirts, it was a major city, some better reception there. But no, oh man, what's that thing that Elon Musk is making? Some Skylink or something along those lines. None of that in the Warhammer universe today, but there we go. Park map has rejoined. It does seem like we will be seeing the same armies. I'll do a quick double check since I did take a screenshot before the battle actually started. So here we go. For the forces of park map, we are seeing 2 Minotaurs with shields. Some very nice units. The shields are there primarily for the Marauder Horsemen. 4 pig units, nope, count them 3. Razor Gore Herd, 2 Chaos Warhounds, no poison today. A little bit of a strange choice if you want to catch Marauder Horsemen, but they are cheaper. Some mobility, Centaurs with throwing axes ×2, and a fairly nice frontline of Gore Herd. Now, usually they do bad against Chaos Warriors, but in this case, it's mostly Chaos Marauders. Fewer Chaos Warriors because of the Razor Gore Herd, and that's going to be fairly nice for the Forces of Chaos today. Oh, actually, no, for the Forces of Beastmen. They are expected to win the infantry fight in this case, but they do have to make sure that the forces are supported. And of course, the mighty Dragon Ogres and the 2 Manticores could pose a threat. However, with the Minotaurs, I do think the Beastmen should be able to do okay. For the Berry Shaman of Wild, it is going to be 1 AoE spell. And what is this? A spell rarely taken to Traitor Kin. Actually, an anti-blob spell is basically final transmutation with a bit of slow and a bit less damage. The Lord Mogre, the Shadow Gave, coming in with his 2 Chaos Spawn summons. Very strong Lord, very standard to take. For Chaos, it's going to be Archaon, no Sigval today, coming in with the Burning Head and Fireball with, oh my gosh, the Slayer of Kings, I believe. Indeed, insane damage for Archaon. It's going to be pretty scary whoever he gets a fight in with. He'll be able to take down Minotaurs pretty quickly and potentially the Lords and Heroes too. Now, for the Chaos Forces, it looks like Chaos is going to be skirmishing away, cutting away from the Beastmen forces. Not a bad choice when you have the mobility advantage, and considering the map too, it is actually massive. You can see all the way in the distance here is where the white line is, so Chaos definitely do have a lot of space to retreat back into for the first engagement. But Beastmen with the good first pick park map, getting in some pretty nice damage on these Marauder Horsemen, actually taking out a whole 6 models on the initial charge, with only the loss of a couple Chaos Warhounds here. Just getting caught up, but this is definitely a very effective trade if you don't want to get kited into oblivion. When you first started to play Guy 2 to 3 times, they would always Cygor army in the forest. Yeah, it's really too bad we didn't get to see this just yet, but still a pretty nice game. The Marauder Horsemen losing a couple models, definitely very big, but a little bit of a bad engagement here. The Gore Herd, very beat up, gets surrounded by Chaos Marauders and routed off already, with a pretty nice initial advantage on the Chaos frontline fight. We'll see if they're able to continue that advantage though, because the mobility of the Beastmen is moving on forwards. Mogre actually advances dangerously forwards. Now, he is harder to snipe than you might expect, so he could potentially survive here, but man oh man is he going aggressively. Spears nicely chasing off the horsemen. This buys the mobility and monstrous units of the Beastmen to go ahead and advance without actually getting skirmished too hard. Although these forces on the right flank haven't engaged yet, on the left it does look like they do batter these Chaos Warriors fairly well, kicking out a good amount of their HP. Marauders are routed off, but oh my goodness, the double Manticore just going ham with the help of Archaon. Mogre does have fire weakness, and with Archaon, actually he only has magic damage, so no fire damage on him. But still, with the Slayer of Kings, he absolutely demolishes Mogre, and he's already running for the hills. That's very bad for the Beastmen forces, but it's not over yet. Chaos Spawn summons have dropped. The Minotaurs are now rushing in, and we are seeing the Beastmen secure a pretty nice infantry advantage, at least in the center line. The Chaos do have their infantry, but they are a little bit out of position, and this is where Archaon and the 2 Manticores could be running into a bit of an issue. One of the Manticores already on the verge of routing off. The other one does manage to escape, but isn't supporting in this battle. That's going to be a nice 800 gold loss for the Chaos side, but here we go. Manticore, sensing blood in the water, does dive in towards Mogre and is likely to take him out. We'll keep a close eye on that. As Traitorkin does drop, hits a Marauder Horseman, some pretty decent damage. Mogre ignores the first hit, manages to dodge it, but potentially some more could take him out. This could very well decide the pace of the game here, but he does begin to advance away and trying to get into the safety of his mobility. Meanwhile, Archaon, at still actually very good HP, despite being surrounded by Minotaurs and the Chaos Spawn, he actually takes very little damage, most of it going in onto the Manticore. As for the other one, it is now getting hit by throwing axes, and it's no Archaon. It's going to have a hard time actually hitting Mogre here, but a single good hit could still end the game almost immediately. As for Archaon, he does throw down a couple buffs on top of himself. Gonna have a little bit more melee defense by the looks of it. Taking out the Minotaurs, absolutely no problem. But Mogre takes 2 hits from the Manticore, very nearly dead, but he hasn't routed yet. Just another hit could very likely take him out here. At only 100 HP, he's on the verge of dying. And now 10 HP and goes down despite not being at 0 HP. The regeneration working in strange ways, bringing him back from the brinks of death, only for him to die anyways. And now in the center area, the Chaos have won with the loss of Mogre. Most of the forces rout off the battlefield, and that's gonna be it. Gonna be game with Biblington taking the second game in this best of 3 today, with absolutely no forest cheese to speak of. But at least he moves forwards towards the further end of the tournament. And Archaon getting in some very good value. The 2 Manticores almost on the dot paying for themselves. But the Beastmen force is just not really able to take too many effective trades here. The Dragon Ogres too actually didn't really do too much. But of course they did help against many of the large units. Definitely not useless. But really I think the biggest play here was sniping out Mogre. As soon as he went down, Beastman leadership just cannot hold. That's going to be the match for Biblington. Now, time to invite the next 2 players. Let's go ahead and send them some messages. Have them join in. All right, so that's Caradoc and Blue Stripe that I will be inviting. B is the same. Going on in. So these players will be coming on in. We will see if they manage to cheese with the forest at all, or if it's just going to be standard play all around for today. Yeah, we want to see some forest cheese. What is this? Come on. It's the easiest $5 you could possibly make here, guys. Neckbat looking for some forest cheese to be far away from you, but the only way to see if these rule sets are cheesy is to allow it and see if it actually plays out. And currently, with the past 2 games worth of testing, it seems like, you know, even if we do allow some pretty relaxed rules, people aren't always going to go for that juicy forest cheese. Perhaps one day I'll need to join into one of these tournaments myself to show these players what cheese really means. But not today. And we'll just be waiting for our next participants to actually come on in. I did forget to start the tournament. I'm going to go ahead and have Biblington move up in the tournament, and we'll just wait for these players to join in. They both do take too long. Biblington will actually just win the entire tournament, unfortunately. So we'll have to see. Well, yeah, it looks like one of the players has messaged me. I need to add them as a friend on Steam, as it can be a little bit janky to join these games on Warhammer, but there we go. The invite has been sent. And we should have our first player joining in just a second. Where's Void when we need him? Yeah, I don't think he's that cheesy. He plays very competitive builds and is a very strong player, having played against him myself. I would not expect to win too many best of 3s against him. I would say I have pretty high respect for Void Laws. Although, you know, maybe he's just done something atrocious that I haven't seen, but for now, my opinions are fairly high. King of the Hill, where the king gets troops and the other doesn't. Seems like a bit of an imbalanced King of the Hill. But I think that's pretty cool. The king can force cheese and the challengers can't. Oh, that's interesting. King of the Forest. Who may amp it the best? There we go. So we have player number 1. Now we wait for the next player. We'll give them a quick 5 minutes. Hey. So your opponent has 5 minutes to join. And there we go. He's in. Sweet. So let's go ahead and set the map. The map is going to be Altdorf Outskirts again. There we go. Map set. And hopefully we get some cheese in this game so that we can experience the glory that this rule set allows. This is from Clan VM. Paradox. I hope that's not some bad word or phrase in some language I don't know. Versus Blue Stripe with a 1 instead of an L or instead of an I. Whoops. Coming in as the opponent, covering Lizardmen and Dark Elves, but surely not the factions we will be seeing. So here we go. I will ready up and we'll see how the picks and bans go. Caradoc will be first pick and ban with the counter picks coming in from his opponent. Not too much to really go on just yet, but we'll be keeping a close eye on seeing how this plays out. Who are first pick? Does Lotus Moon still play? He was an OG Forest Cheeser. I think he still streams actually on Twitch, I think. Do check him out. It's pretty sweet. Let's see, you already do King of the Hill, where you're the king, Neckbet. People have to lose to you. That seems like a pretty interesting King of the Hill. I would want to participate myself. I'm sure that would be quite fun. But yes, Human Boy does actually host King of the Hills. I think I saw there were like 2 tournaments that you hosted recently, plus a speedrun tournament, which I will actually be releasing videos out later. Human Boy. The plan is I'm gonna put out videos on my 2 speedruns that I did, and then hopefully send a few people your way. Should help grow your YouTube channel, which, by the way, Human Boy does have a YouTube channel. Feel free to post the link in chat if it allows you. But yeah, some pretty fun stuff if you want a sneak peek at my soon-to-come videos. It's basically a battle speedrun where you face against an opponent, AI, and you have to defeat their army as quickly as possible. And with what I managed to do, I did get it under 1 minute for both speedruns. So fingers crossed I managed to win the second tournament. So something to look forward to if you're interested in the more PvE side of Warhammer. Yeah, should be good. We need more people to join the speedruns. Yeah, for sure. I really love PvE content for Warhammer. As you guys have seen with Lore Master of Sotek, the one who started it all with the glorious, I think, Altharian speedrun was the one I started with. Absolutely just a joy to do. And I hope that community can grow more, but it always seems like it has a hard time kicking off. You love saying yes without consent? What's going on in chat? My favorite part of Human Boy's videos are when someone asks a question in chat and he answers yes. Oh boy. Oh boy, that's sketchy. But hey, look at that. We have Greenskins ban Lizardmen and Vampire accounts. The first pick and ban is upon us. But will we be seeing a vicious counter pick? No, a Bretonia pick. Oh boy, now this is going to be exciting. Greenskins against Bretonia. On a flat map, I would say it's about even if both players know what they're doing. But on a map with forests under these rules, Bretonia could have a bit of a problem here. And that's going to be pretty interesting, I think. Yeah, that's going to be... I am interested to see what cheese comes out here. Now, with the Greenskins, half of their army may reside entirely in the forest. The other half must stay outside and may not enter until the Greenskin forces either rout or begin exiting themselves. So we'll see. We shall see. But honestly, I would put my money on Greenskins here. Not only that, they can also advance through the forest. And that's going to be very scary as Bretonia. They won't really have a safe place to fight with Altdorf outskirts. There's patches of forests everywhere. Not a ton of positions to flank either. So this could be very interesting, but both players are setting up. Neckbet, you're saying campaign speedruns are my OG content? Yeah. I was playing multiplayer at the time, quite a bit actually, but oh man. The speedruns is where I got the YouTube channel started. Same with Twitch. Does the forest affect the charge of flying monsters? That is correct. It does not. Neckbet not actually answering that question, actually just saying no commentary. Yeah. The ultimate in beginner YouTuber videos. There's like no sound. You just listen. It's me. I think it's just like me cheesing the game for like 5 hours straight. It's not, the moment to moment content isn't especially interesting, but I do like to think that the theory crafting and the execution involved was actually pretty good. And interestingly enough, the first video I ever posted actually is my most successful video on the entire channel. Because I think Lore Master of Sotek gave it a shout out and did an interview with me. So very surprising. It has like almost 3,000 views, definitely more than 2,000, which is just mind blowing to me. That's like 10 of my other successful early videos. It's just crazy, guys. Absolutely crazy. But enough about me. I'm really excited to post my videos for Human Boy on the sort of speedrun tournaments that he ran, just because they're so much shorter than campaign tournaments, and they were just a blast to play. But here we go, loading into map number 1. Best of 3, number 2 against Caradoc and Blue Stripe for the green skin player. From Client VM, it is Caradoc coming in with, would you look at that, a Goblin Great Shaman. A very hefty front line of infantry. Lots of Savage Orc Big Guns. 4 of them, in fact. I think 1 short of maxing out. Nasty Skulkers to slow down cavalry. Goblins with spears. Orc, Boar, Big Guns. And, of course, the 8 Peak Loonies, but that's not the most exciting part. Actually, maybe it is, because the rest of the army, it's just some cavalry, just some skirmishers. And what is this? What is this? Not a lot of forest cheese. But no, there we go. Here we go. Finally, a little bit more of a forest deployment with infantry. We'll see how that army shapes up. For the Bretonian side, we are seeing 6 units of cavalry. I would say fairly risky on a map so forested, but the investment is surprisingly low, with only 3 questing knights and the rest being 3 knights of the realm. Not the most expensive cavalry force you could see with Bretonia. For the Bretonian infantry corps, we are seeing peasant bowmen. 5 of them, in fact. 4 peasant mobs and 2 men-at-arms. And that's it. For the heroes, you know, the usual double paladin. 1 of them, Shirley, coming in with Guardian. Indeed, Enchantress with healing. Chalice of Potions to deal with any potential blob forces. Healing and Awakening of the Wood for some slows. Potentially will be catching out some greenskin cavalry, but both forces here are playing fairly standard today. lining up in a pitched battle against each other. And it's going to come down to some pretty hefty micro. See how well this the cavalry actually performs here. They do have a lot of opportunities. Some very nice cycle charging here against the greenskins. But of course, the greenskin front line is going to be a lot. Just an absolute ton more tankier. Better at fighting than the Bretonnian front line. So clock is sort of ticking for the Bretonnians. And with the skirmishers too, being so mobile, they'll be able to shoo away a lot of the cavalry forces here. So already looking a little bit scary for Bretonnia, but we'll see how the rest of the battle plays out. To make this one have over 200 likes, that's insane. That is way more than I would expect. But here we go. The forces come on in immediately. Knights catching out some forest goblin spider riders. Awakening of the wood, slowing them down. Beautiful play from the Bretonnian side. Immediately gets them nearly routed, but just barely doesn't. Very unfortunate, considering the Winds of Magic commitment to try and do that. And with a little bit of poke back onto the questing knights, that damage almost wasn't even worth it. Very rough. Vindictive Glare does drop too, but will the trees block it? No, the paladins just barely outpacing the trees. Take a full hit of Vindictive Glare, but they do have high armor, so it doesn't get too much damage in. The Bretonnian forces do advance and meet the greenskins in the middle. And now a spell actually drops. And it does look like it will be nasty skulkers. They do slow down the knights, but this spell over here actually doesn't get too much damage. I presume it's the Gorkle Fix-It from the Goblin Shaman, but actually misses for the most part. On the left flank, we are seeing a big cavalry engagement now. Questing Knights, Paladins, all fighting here, but they do get countercharged by the Orc Borovoy Big Guns, taking quite a bit of damage on this flank too. The Cavalry Knights of the Realm are falling, and some reserve cavalry, a Questing Knight and a Knight of the Realm being forgotten. That's definitely going to be pretty rough. The nasty Skulkers do get routed off though, and the Paladins are still fairly healthy, but a bit of a problem now. The Bretonnian center line is gonna get pushed back by these Savage Orc Big Guns, but the Knights are, remembered, they will be able to protect these archers, so that will be good. But just taking a look at this right flank, a complete collapse of the Bretonnian infantry and cavalry side. They are completely devastated here, and this will allow the greenskins to loop and hook around to catch out these archers, but they're not done yet. The cavalry will be able to come in to intercept. They will slam into the Savage Orc Big Guns, but not before many of these archers have already routed off. It's looking pretty bad for the Bretonnian side at this point. The Goblin Great Shaman too at fairly good HP. And two Paladins just sort of fighting Savage Orcs really, not really making the biggest plays in the battle just yet. Some nasty Skulkers too. They are advancing and chasing off the rest of the peasants. And that's going to be pretty scary. Another unit routes off. It's Questing Knights, potentially a Fanatic Bomb too, dropping in on top of them. We'll check the value on these loons later, but at 20 kills, possibly. The Chalice of Potion drops also, but as the Knights disengage, it allows the Savage Orcs to dodge it without even having to micro. Very brutal here, and now the greenskins have secured a very decisive lead. So much so, I would say, this game is basically over, but of course calling shots early can always be risky. The Goblin Great Shaman does advance. Two Paladins are here. It's a scary fight, especially with the Savage Orcs, but potentially some crazy RNG is all they could hope for at this point. Paladin busting on through past the Savage Orcs to save the Fey Enchantress. Meanwhile, the rest of the Bretonnian peasantry completely routed off along with the Knights, and the Fey Enchantress takes a massive hit from the Goblin Great Shaman. That's very rough. A second attack lands, hits the Paladin. Spider, it is anti-large, as you can see in the bottom left side over there. And wow, just absolutely devastates the Paladin with no other support for the Bretonnian side, and that's going to be a very decisive victory without forest camping, mind you. Clan VM Caradoc. Very nice play. That's going to be a GG. As the Bretonnians do hit army losses. A quick 5-minute game. And an end. But not to the end for this best of 3. as Blue Stripe does have another opportunity to bring it to an ace match. Now, I think the biggest plays here were these Savage Orc big guns, getting those massive counter charges on the Bretonnian cavalry, using the infantry advantage to tank for the charges, and getting huge value with the rest of the units. 8 peak loonies slamming into the cavalry forces. 1,000 gold value, definitely worth it. The skirmishers doing decently, and more so just putting pressure on the Bretonnians. But that doesn't mean they weren't useful. They can chase off units, and that pressure does really secure many avenues for the greenskins. Just making sure that the Bretonnian cavalry do not have free reign over the situation. So that's that game. On to the next one. We'll see what the players decide to go for. Go ahead and open up the updated screen blocker. The winner of this match will be facing off against Biblington. So we'll see who manages to make it. And we'll keep a close eye on these picks and bans. That's correct. You can find the forest rule write-up in the description of this video right now. I did the preparation, guys, and you can check out all the resources right down there in the description. Not a lot of stone trolls recently. Ace Poon. Yeah, stone trolls, if your opponent can predict them, they're actually not that strong. I think in terms of skill cap, stone trolls, they don't have a high skill ceiling. Whereas fanatics, skirmishers, goblin nasty skulkers, you know, units along those lines, they will generally do a lot better at higher levels of play. And I think usually that's what you will typically see from from a lot of players. They will, of course, still use stone trolls because going the same build all the time is not going to help you out. But I don't think they are as devastating as many of the other units. It's more so just trying to win through your build selection rather than thing. Oh, oops. Yeah. So let me set the map. The map is Pillar of Bone. I'm not too used to being the tournament admin here, so I actually forgot to set the map. Set Pillar of Bone. The Bone Zone itself, with patchy forests all around, potential for a lot of kite, and more or less not too much forest camping. There is a little bit that could happen, but otherwise, it's a fairly clean map. Now, what I'm wondering is whether or not these players are actually going to cheese. Please, please, players. This is a forest rule test tournament. And if everyone's going to play straight up, I don't know if anyone's really going to make the prize. But we'll see who submits a replay here. And it looks like it's going to be an Empire counter pick. High Elves coming in from Blue Stripe. So Empire against High Elves. Usually Empire can be seen doing quite well against the forces of the High Elves. With their high DPS and the low model count of the High Elves, they will generally run into a rough time. Empire too, with some decent armor and shields, don't take nearly as much damage from the pesky archers from the non-AP High Elf faction. So generally you will see Empire do okay here. Although there are quite a few factions that can be scarier. Greenskins, though, being out of the mix, and with the bans banning out Lizardmen and Dark Elves, it's not the worst for High Elves here. I'm surprised it wasn't a Chaos pick, however, but potentially the Empire player here, Caradoc, choosing or not having a lot of experience with Chaos can be common. And it's not a hard counter either. Biblington saying, I have realized I might not actually know how to cheese. All you gotta do is make a box in the forest that is halfway embedded into it, and you are more or less good to go. That is probably one of the cheesier situations you can do here in this rule set, and if you submit that replay, you will likely win the second $5 prize. So feel free to do it. I'm giving you the secrets to winning this tournament here right now. Right now and then. Or it might be that you don't understand what people mean by cheese. Ooh, that is very philosophical there. Good sir. Yeah, you know, it really depends on perspective. Corner camping technically has counterplay. Just the main thing that it brings is more build roulette, as people like to call it. And that's about it. Yeah, that is about it. 51% out of the forest, 49% inside. Remember, you can only field 20 units, so worst case scenario, you have like a 5% difference in your units. And your mobility doesn't count, so it's usually bigger than 5%. And given how much of a problem people feel greenskins are with their 5% difference in win rate from 50%, I think it's good enough to distinguish. Now, for the armies, we are seeing an Empire player coming in for Clan VM Caradoc with a Jade Wizard, an artillery piece, the Great Cannons, and 3 units of Demogryph Knights. Elite Empire Cavalry. I'm pretty sure that's legal, right? Demogryph Knights can be taken in 3. We will make a quick double check just to make sure we don't embarrass ourselves in front of the millions of people on stream right now. And indeed, it is 3. The Lord and Arch Lector, very rare. Usually you do see Volkmar for his unbreakable chariot. And just a line of handgunners. Now, here we go. We are seeing the tiniest bit of forest camping here from Clan VM Caradoc with a whole 2 units close to the forest. You madman. Jeez, I can't believe no one's cheesing in a forest cheese tournament. But here we go for the high elf forces. We are seeing a moon dragon. Not seen that often, but slightly less budget than the forest, than the normal fire dragon, sun dragon. Some dragon princes. A little bit of a dragon theme going on, but not really. And these guys will usually lose out to 3 demogryphs, I would expect. Even the dragon, unless it gets a huge dragon breath, it's going to be pretty bad. Especially with handgunner support. But with the core infantry of archers, it's definitely some counterplay. To pressure the handgunners and some silver in guard too. That won't be going down anytime soon. Especially against demogryphs. So potentially a scary high elf build here from Blue Stripe. But right off the bat, the artillery slamming into the dragon princes, getting them down by 4 models. Not a bad start. Second volley does hit. Oh, and absolutely devastating, bringing them down to 32. Now, these Fireborn, they can't be healed back. The lore of life does not revive dead models. And another cannon shot hits. The heal comes down as the missile fire from the handgunners drops. But just absolutely devastating. Oh my goodness, a tragedy. Hundreds of years of training for these dragon princes, only to be getting taken out by the gunpowder of the Empire. And now the handgunners do turn. They fire onto the moon dragon, getting a little bit too close to the sun and falling because of it. The wings getting torn apart by lead. I'm pretty sure that's how that story played out. But potentially a very nice breath attack onto these Demogryph Knights. Slams right into them, takes out a handful of models. But no, only a couple, getting spread damage on the rest, and that's going to get healed up by the Empire. Just absolutely devastating. Empire advantage already very strong, but the infantry moves up for the forces of the High Elves. Like I said, the Silverin are expected to do very well in this situation. But will they do well in the late game, getting cycle charged in the back by these Demogryph Knights, who are looking to dominate the battlefield right now? They slam into these Dragon Princes, but Alariel does have her support. She's going to be buffing them up and giving them Faw's protection, melee defense, and armor. That's going to be keeping them alive a little bit longer than usual, but with the Warrior Priest, no Arch Lector coming on in, they're getting fully surrounded. And so far, this cavalry battle is fully stagnated. Moondragon does land, though. We'll keep an eye on the Arch Lector HP. He gets healing, but he's going to be, could potentially be in a rough situation. As for the archers, they do pressure the handgunners, getting them down pretty low, but they are now getting charged by the Demogryph Knights. They will be out of the battle very soon, but a much more important battle over here. Alariel Ever, the extremely powerful lord, will be healing up these Dragon Princes and the Moon Dragon, but they're not doing a lot of damage to these Demogryph Knights. One of them actually comes back, and oh my goodness, 62 melee attack, enough to hit even Iron Breakers, routes off the Moon Dragon and the Dragon Princes right off the battlefield, and it looks like they will be chasing them off too. They will likely be gone. And here we go. The High Elf front line, a staunch line of spears. Very strong, but probably not strong enough to deal with the rest of the Empire forces. The Moon Dragon is out. The Dragon Princes are out. The ROR Dragon Princes, shattered beyond belief. A single one left to live to tell the tale of the day they got massacred by cannon fire. And now the cannons are firing on Alariel. She tries to take revenge by sniping out the Jade Wizard, but some good micro from Caradoc does slip him out of there. And now Alariel is going to suffer the same fate, getting shut down by powder. Really, really showing that, and man, oh man, just timing your engagement a little bit badly will allow some just tons and tons of damage here if you're not careful. That's going to be it. Clan VM Caradoc taking the opportunity to just steal Chair Blue Stripe out of the tournament with 2 wins, a decisive victory. Demogryph Knights doing not that much damage actually, but just being extremely tanky, surviving for a very long time. And the real heroes here of today, the Cannons, coming in with a combined total of almost 3,000 damage value, taking out both Dragon Princes. And man, oh man, I don't even want to look at that. The Moon Dragon at 1,000 gold value with its dragon breaths and melee prowess, but honestly, this High Elf army just having a really rough time versus this Empire setup. And that's gonna be it. Biblington, you shall now be called to join in place to take up the last competitive slot against Caradoc. We shall see how well you do. He has joined in. And I will now set the map. The map is going to be MP Blue Reach River. Boom. A very huge map with forests on both flanks. This map generally not used for cheese very often, but with the new rule set, I presume the potential is definitely there. And we'll see how it plays out. Usually both players are just simply advancing through the forest. Not too much actually going on there. And that's about how it plays out. There's honestly, there's not a lot of crazy forest cheesing. So I'm wondering if it's going to change. Now, Biblington, he was in chat. He did witness that. That the potential for forest cheese is there, and that it is his for the taking. So I'm wondering if he's going to actually go for it. Of course, Caradoc, he could try to hard counter potential forest cheese, and that could end very badly for Biblington. So perhaps both players will opt to go for some standard play again. Biblington opting for the greenskins, banning out Vampire Coast and Lizardmen, gets countered by the Vampire Counts, about as standard as you can expect. But do you know what this means, guys? A potential box could come into play. 50% in the forest. Could be huge. And I'm going to see how, I'm going to have my fingers crossed for an actual forest cheese in this tournament. But we'll have to see. This could be very good for a single entity monster forest box. Vampire Counts, as most of you guys know, they do not have access to ranged tools. Of course, they do have their magic, but they do rely on mobility and large single entity monsters to break greenskin boxes. Now, we have seen before greenskins, they do position against walls to prevent flanks. But we haven't really seen them use the forest before to defend their most important units. I think possibly one of the more effective strategies we could see here is placing archers in the forest, defended by a couple units of possibly big guns. They'll be able to fire out of it with no problems at all, while also being defended from any potential engagements. This could be huge. Do Sigmar Suns beat Silver in 1v1? I would imagine the Silverin win, but I wouldn't be too surprised if they lost it. Sigmar Suns, they do pretty well, but I don't think they're that good at melee. Generally, Empire state troops are just garbage at melee. Absolute trash. Except for Sigmar Suns, which are the exception in that they have high leadership. But I've never really seen them kill stuff, unfortunately so. So basically, Wood Elves can now forest camp versus vampire counts if they bring enough air spam. It depends on what you mean by forest camping. They can play defensively near the forest with 50% of their units inside, with skirmishers not counting as part of the 50%. So if you have 5 spears, 3 of them must be outside of the forest. It is not impossible to break into that defensive box, but we will have to see. This was talked to with Zyphos actually, to try and determine what would be what is cheesy and what isn't. Zyphos leaning more and not calling him out or anything, just sort of stating player opinions here. From what I gathered, he wanted to see what more relaxed forest rules would allow. And I'm excited to see if it allows for some insane strategies. If the game has counterplay and it is easy to cast without the forest getting in the way, I'm okay to accept that greenskins could pull it through in this matchup using the forest, since currently, you don't really see the forest get used that often. A lot of people just tend to ignore it, as we have seen in this very tournament. So yeah, I think the terrain usage could be added, but we have to be very careful about it, which is why this tournament exists. Let's see. Giant spiders have Strider, so they don't take penalties in the forest. Dang! That's pretty massive. That's pretty big, for sure. But here we go. The match, it begins. MP Blue Reach River. Now, you may be confused as this is not a river, but that is because the river actually resides all the way over here. A huge river. Could carry multiple large ships. Very low resolution, apparently, too. As the debug camera, the stream, by the way, sponsored by the debug camera, does allow you to fly into areas you're not supposed to. But enough of that. On to the actual armies. What are we seeing? Guess what? It's gonna be a Vampire Counts army with a little bit of Ethereal. Karen Wraiths ×2. Blood Knights ×2. Risky with a forest rule setup like this one. But Skeleton Warriors, decent combatants, but mostly there to stall, for you to cycle charge as much as humanly possible. The Lord, gonna be a Strigoi Vampire Lord. He is a single entity killer, and you take him instead of the usual breath attacks, specifically so that you can cycle charge single entities better. He has anti-large, can summon crypt ghouls too, which is very effective against boxes, and some really nice healing along with that. In the forest, a little bit of an awkward standoff here. Dogs sniffing out these Goblin Forest Spider Rider archers along with the normal Wolf Rider archers here, and 2 RORs, the regen ones, Deft Creepers, and the Mangy Marauders for AP. The Greenskin forces are going to be deploying near the forest, but actually not going in it just yet. Coming in with a box of Savage Orc Big Guns, Night Goblins, and some Black Orcs, which will actually be residing in the forest. Now, to see if this army is legal, it's very easy. All you have to do is count the units and see which ones are actually touching or within the forest. I think the wording says touching, so any units that are basically along this line will also be counted. And in this case, it's just the black orcs. Let's see. You think... Oh, yeah, that's right, guys. We do have cheese, but it's pretty modest. It's pretty modest right now, I gotta say. Biblington has decided to deploy. Just barely touching it. In this case, this would count as 3 units in the forest and about, like 5 or 7 outside. So he's definitely well within the rules and not nearly as cheesy as it could be. For the vampire counts, skirmishing begins. These dire wolves, they don't have missile resist. They are not the Norskin ROR variant. And they're just going to be juking, and weaving to dodge these initial volleys. Not a lot of damage. They're actually dodging exceptionally well. Karodok flexing his APM and his micro, avoiding tons of that damage. So instead, it looks like the greenskin archers now focusing the Karen raids. Quite inefficient. You can see they don't take a lot of damage. Despite having no armor, they essentially have, like roughly like 100 armor with their ethereal, I think, since it's 75%, if I'm doing my math correctly, which I think I might not be, but let's assume 100 armor, which is quite a bit against these forces. The armor piercing not coming into effect either. Some Blood Knights looking for some units on the far left flank, but that does not exist. And now the Strigoi Lord is going to be flying on in, potentially catching out some of these skirmishers, but also a risky play. He could take a bit of free damage here if the skirmishers decide to fire in on him, and they do, getting in some pretty nice damage, taking out maybe a pixel's worth of his HP. Nothing too much to be worried about here. Both sides sort of just trading about evenly, I would say. Of course, ammunition when it comes to skirmishers is absolutely huge. You have to make sure that your ammo usage is kept safe. Now, Overcast Nahak drops onto these units. Pretty good, pretty big Winds of Magic investment. And with the risk of Overcast damage, possibly risky, but it does play out well. And it does heal up all of these units to full life again. Essentially, the Greenskins have only done about 11 Winds of Magic damage to the vampire counts. And a decent amount for this initial skirmishing fight, but not exactly what they want to be looking for, or how many arrows they have actually fired so far. So here we go. Remember, so under the current rule set, skirmishers do not count as part of the defensive formation. So these guys are allowed to inhabit the forest completely, and this defensive formation is what we're actually looking at for what's allowed to be in the forest. And right now, they only have a modest, basically 1 unit inside currently. Now, the vampire counts, they do decide to continue advancing. They want to close in onto this box to eventually catch it. A potentially fairly nice pick here. The dogs, they catch the spider riders. And if you take a look at the speeds, the dogs have very close speeds in this situation. With the extra charge bonus speed they get from chasing, they do actually manage to pick off quite a few models, and that's very nice for the vampire counts. In general, I would say the vampire counts are winning in this initial engagement, but possibly just barely. These skirmishers on the right flank are still getting in a ton of damage and actually cycle charging a little bit here. A tiny bit scary for these poor goblins, but a little bit of damage done to the zombies. Nothing too crazy either way. Now, the vampire counts, they have finally reached the box, and it's going to come down to how well they cycle charge here. Vindictive Glare does fire off barely any damage. Strigoi Vampire Lord, he does have 80 armor, which will negate most of its damage. And I don't think that was Overcast either, so nothing too crazy there. The dogs have taken quite a bit of damage, but their job primarily is to counter skirmish. And with how much arrow fire they've taken, it's a fairly good time for them. Do you think those black orcs are part of a defensive formation? In this case, the black orcs are part of the same defensive formation as this box. It's pretty clear that that is the case, and they don't count as an individual formation on their own. So here we go. The armies, they continue to move on along to defend themselves, and also the black orcs are solo units, so they're mostly on their own. Although I do see the point that you're getting to, FNG, for sort of how to rule this. Now the Black Orcs, they are moving out of the forest now. Nope, just moving back a tiny bit. And the Strigoi Vampire Lord does get into position. He does have a strong single entity breath attack. Vindictive Glare slams into him, barely any damage. And now we are seeing ammunition. Nope, not running out just yet. Only on 3 of these mobile units. The Vampire counts and move in some zombies to get started with the attacking. And that does line up a beautiful Scab Scrath to hit those Savage Orcs, getting in some pretty nice damage. Ooh, and a second Scab Scrath does hit. A little bit misaligned, could have done a little bit more damage, but still pretty vicious. 450 gold off the bat for the Vampire counts. And it's going to be a slow engage. VM Caradoc opting to get less efficient infantry engagements so that he can use his spells more effectively. This is a pretty good choice because he doesn't have a lot of units that want to hammer an anvil here. And he would want knights. He would be using his blood knights to hammer an anvil. And that's basically the only time he would need his infantry. So choosing for a slower engagement like this is fairly good. A really nice dodge too on that Vindictive Glare. It does actually avoid it. But there we go. Oh my goodness. Brain Burst annihilating half of those Karen Wraiths right off the bat. Getting into pretty good damage. So pretty good thing too from the Vampire Count player. He's choosing not to attack these Black Orcs that are residing in the forest. And he does not need to. Eventually, if he routes off the rest of these forces, he can simply disengage and wait for the Black Orcs to leave, but actually sending in Karen Wraiths after them. Very nice play to weed them out of the forests since they do not want to be taking that fight. Breath attack on the Goblin Great Shaman to get some pretty nice poke damage, and a charge from the cavalry, slowing down the Black Orcs. Cavalry does take a lot of damage in return. These are Blood Knights. It's a lot of damage, but a pretty hefty engagement over here. Some forces do pull in to support this army here, but only just barely clipping into the forest. No rule breaks there, but this does mean that the box formation for the Greenskins is now getting torn apart. Sirens, no. Karen Wraiths do engage. Fanatics drop on top of them, but it's non-magical. The Fanatics barely do any damage. At least I think so. But there we go. Return fire. Everyone said Fanatics are pretty painful, but the double Scab Scrath annihilating those goblins. That's going to be the last Fanatic bomb in this box. Getting pulled apart pretty hard, but it's not over yet. Those Black Orcs absolutely devastating to the forces of those Black Knights. They actually did crumble away. No, the Blood Knights, they might have disengaged actually, most of them. But the Black Orcs are still pretty vicious, and they have actually re-secured this defensive formation for the Greenskins. It's not too bad. The skirmishers are completely out of ammunition at this point, so no more pressure on the Strigoi Vampire Lord. And it's just going to come down right now to a pretty hefty fight, with all of these Savage Orcs doing quite well. Both Scab Scraths are on cooldown, and there are only 2 left. So I would expect that the Greenskins could duke this out fairly well. And in the late game, cycle charging is going to be a little bit more difficult for the Vampire counts. That could pose quite the problem here for the Vampire counts if they don't end this quickly. But a nice play. Both White Kings actually dive in to secure a breath attack on the Great Shaman, but an attack animation does manage to dodge it. Some good timing for the Greenskins does save the Great Shaman a bit of HP, but the White Kings have not been dealt with yet. What is good though is that most of the infantry for the Vampire counts is beginning to fall. Over here, the Dire Wolves chasing off some Greenskin infantry. The Vampire counts have a pretty strong, secure lead on the mobility front, so that's nothing too much to worry about. Oh my goodness! And another Vindictive Glare dodge. That was actually really nicely done. Vindictive Glare is a surprisingly hard spell to dodge, so every time I see it miss, I'm quite surprised. And another good play from the Vampire counts. The White Kings have been on the hunt. They hunted down the caster for the Greenskins, which means that's just Vindictive Glare left and Itchy Nuisance. Scab Scraths do drop, not a ton of damage, but they do bring the goblins down below their threshold. But without that shaman, these Karen rates will be able to act quite a bit more effectively against everything here, just because there won't be any brain burstas shutting them down. So let's see, why does he keep the skeletons in the back like that? Well, that is to make sure that he has as much time to use abilities as possible. When you send all your troops in against the greenskins, you actually lose your infantry faster, and that can actually work out pretty badly for the greenskins here. Now, interesting thing about the rules here. I'm going to double check the attacking rule. And in the current rule set, cycle charging on single entities may be slightly different than usual. I'll have to check that later, but for now, we are seeing the vampire counts. They are actually beginning to run out of forces here. A lot of their single entities are getting shut down. And, shut down just being surrounded by black orcs. And they've essentially run out of infantry here. Now, cycle charging, of course, is free once you if you have cavalry and Karen rates engaging, but those will be going down soon too. And potentially a greenskin comeback here. As you can see, the Black Orc Big Boss providing immune to psychology to all these forces is really stopping them from routing off here. Goblin Great Shaman, however, has taken a decent amount of ammunition, or decent amount of damage in this battle, but I don't think it's going to be enough. The HP is deceptive. He does still have 3,000 more HP. However, a pretty nice charge from these Blood Knights do look like they will be getting very close to routing off these Savage Orc Big Guns. They do rout off. And that means it's just going to be the Black Orcs and 2 more Savage Orc Big Guns. Not impossible for the Greenskins to grind it out in this situation. Some mobility coming back too to slow down these Direwolves. And now we are seeing the heal cap for the vampire counts. The Strigoi Vampire Lord at a very, actually fairly close HP to the Goblin Great Shaman has heal capped. Any damage that goes onto him at this point is essentially permanent. And his cycle charging does allow him to take, does actually end in him taking a few hits here. The disengage on the cavalry too. Fewer of them getting bogged down by the Black Orcs. And I would say I'm a little bit worried for the vampire counts here. Despite the balance of power lead, I think the composition for this late game is just not that great. The Blood Knights, they do charge in again though. They do have fairly nice HP maxes, as they haven't gone that close to their heal cap yet. But oh my goodness, I think Itchy Nuisance does drop on them. No, it's just a slow effect. It's just the buff on this Black Orc Big Boss to make sure nothing routes off here. Very good, as it does make sure that these units will continue to crumble. And as the Strigoi Vampire Lord tries to disengage, he's getting slowed down by the Goblin Great Shaman, but will an attack land on top of him? It seems like he will just barely outpace the Goblin Great Shaman, but the balance of power has reignited for the Greenskins. Is now in their favor, and it looks like perhaps choosing not to attack an enemy force in the forest, Biblington is actually backing up a little bit. His force was defensive earlier too, and it looks like he's opting for a defensive formation instead of an aggressive one. Not a bad choice, and it will be outside of the forest. The Strigoi Vampire Lord looking for an opportunity to charge the Great Shaman, his main target. Of course, he does have anti-large, but that does mean he will get completely surrounded here. And with the Black Orc Big Boss, the Big Boss himself, going to be getting a really nice surround on the Strigoi Vampire Lord. And it looks like Biblington will be able to secure this game. Not really too much because of the forest, unfortunately. He didn't really abuse it as much as he possibly could have. But nevertheless, I think it was still a pretty nice game. In the end, though, it's just all this elite infantry could not really be worn down. Cavalry having a bit of a hard time actually shutting them down, given that they were just because of the general idea of having a box formation. And here we go, a final disengage for the vampire counts, but the Strigoi Vampire Lord eats a fat vindictive glare in the back, and the Blood Knights do disappear. It's going to be GG, well played, and Biblington coming on out with the first victory in the finals of the tournament today. Actually getting pretty close, so a little bit of back and forth there. The White Kings did exceptionally well for themselves for how cheap they are. But in the end, the Strigoi Vampire Lord, if you go for a Strigoi Vampire Lord, you don't have any breath attacks, any proper breath attacks to take out elite infantry, much more a single entity duelist. And there weren't any black coaches to really support. The Black Knights mostly were meant to deal with the infantry, but in the end, they just were not able to pay off for the two of them. Now, the Direwolves, they did do really good. This was mostly the early game, chasing off all the skirmishers. Unfortunately, just not enough to deal with that box. So GG, and on to the next map, which is going to be River Amaxon. Let me see if I can find that real quick, and then I will go ahead and jump on to chat to see what is going on. Map set. Remember, this is a best of 3. Yeah, that was pretty close. I think in the end, the greenskins really just secured their advantage. Unless there was a mass rout on the Savage Orcs, I couldn't really imagine the Vampire counts doing well enough there. With the Black Orcs at basically half HP too, they could easily take out the Strigoi Ghoul King. He is not an infantry killer. And like, honestly, I think black coaches or something else might have been needed, but perhaps Caradop wasn't really expecting that type of box. Let's see, why Strigoi? Yes, he can do really well against single entity monsters. Just because of his anti-large bonus, good armor piercing, and I think he's a little bit more mobile being on a Terrorgeist instead of a dragon. Considering vampire counts is supposed to be a counter to greenskins, you see them losing quite often, says Shog. I think in my personal experience, I actually have a pretty good win rate against greenskins as the vampire counts, and I only play them a bit. I think the main issue that sort of comes up is that vampire counts, it's still not an easy win against greenskins. There are a lot of situations where their greenskin builds will do well, and I would say it's only slightly favored. Even the most favored matchups will come down to, like, let's say a faction can only win 33% of the time. That means that 1 out of every 3 games you will see them winning, which is actually quite often. And when it comes to vampire counts versus greenskins, you will be seeing that. I don't think it's an unwinnable matchup for the greenskins there. All they have to do is weed out a bit of a mistake from the vampire counts, and they're good to go. Also, too, it's important to note a lot of counter picks. A lot of people will practice the bad matchup counter pick, and that will tip the favors that would tip the balance in their favor quite often too. Greenskin players have practiced many times against vampire counts, whereas I think people who use vampire counts as a counter pick don't practice the matchup nearly as much. So that's sort of my theory in that situation. Feel free to believe it or not, but that's generally how I sleep at night, since I don't think greenskins are that much of a menace. Although they are very popular in the meta right now, which I feel like we could have a shakeup at some point. Now the faction picks, it's going to be Wood Elves, Van Vatonia, and Lizardmen, where Biblington has gone for a Chaos pick. Not a bad choice, not a bad choice at all. Chaos, they do have a lot of silver shielded infantry, but they will have a bit of a harder time actually catching the Wood Elves. Especially on a map like this, River Amaxon, the Wood Elves are allowed to freely kite into the forest as much as they want, and that could pose a pretty big problem. for the Chaos. Of course, we could also see a forest box for the Wood Elves with skirmishers, but their box will have to be 50% outside of the forest to be legal. Let's see, you're having a hard time thinking up a terrible matchup. Coast versus Dwarves, maybe? Actually, surprisingly enough, Coast versus Dwarves is one of my highest win rate matches. With the build I stole from Evenstar, it is just devastating. A lot of Dwarf players, even people who play Dwarves pretty often, will lose to a good enough Coast build. I would highly recommend you checking that out. As for vampire counts against greenskins, if you look that up on my YouTube tournament playlist, which I have on the YouTube channel, if you look at the descriptions, if you can find a vampire counts versus greenskins game that I am playing, you should be able to see a good amount of victories. And the fact that the timestamps generally have the factions listed out, it's actually not a bad way to figure out how to play some matchups. Although I don't think I'm the best vampire counts player there. It's just a resource for you to access. Give us the Coast build. It's on my channel. It's all there for you guys to access. And I am completely fine with you guys stealing all my builds. As long as, you know, as long as it's, I don't know, send them to my YouTube channel or something. But honestly, I don't care. It's a competitive game. Build stealing is part of it. Now, both players are ready. They will be diving into the match. Will Caradoc be able to bring it back to an ace match? Or are we going to be seeing a lot of 2-0 victories today? A little bit disappointing if that's the case, but I think it will still be fine. A nice short tournament today. And as we load on into the game, we shall see who comes out on top and who will be able to forest camp the hardest. Fingers crossed we get to see something. Most of the rest of the matchups seem like 45-55 at worst. If you look at the Warhammer World Cup stats, although not the most reliable, they really show you which matchups have a bit of a contest between them. A lot of players, I find, tend to say that matches are very one-sided, even though oftentimes the other faction will win, the underdog faction, just because of skill or because of build selection, which are two huge factors when it comes to Warhammer. Poon and friends, did you play quadruple Hellstorm variant as a dwarf player? I think it's quite difficult to beat. Quadruple Hellstorm, that's pretty crazy, but for now, let's go ahead and dive into the game. And I'll talk about that later. For the Wood Elves, it's a full cavalry army. Pretty crazy, but not entirely unexpected against Chaos. They're good against infantry, and they can shoot with the ranged variants. Glade Riders, just 2 of them to snipe out key targets and to counter the Chaos Skirmishers. And the Sisters of Twilight, too, coming on in to give Chaos a hard time. To snipe out their lords, that should do fairly well. A Spellsinger of Life also. And the Lost Sylvan Knights coming in on a forest deployment along the side here. Some great Stag Knights too, very elite infantry. And we'll likely be seeing these guys dealing with a ton of Chaos infantry. Over here, in the forest, 3 units. It's going to be 1 Swords of Chaos ROR Chaos Knights Lances, and Archaon, no Sigvald, which is pretty worrying for the Chaos. He does have Burning Head, magic damage, Flaming Sword, and Fireball. A lot of spells too, but he's likely going to get sniped out by the Sisters of Twilight unless these Marauder Horsemen manage to protect them. The build too, it's going to be mostly Chaos Marauders, actually 5 of them, with 3 Chaos Warriors, 1 Mirror Guard ROR to support. But honestly, these guys are going to have a really hard time against the cycle charging. I'm a little bit worried about the Chaos here, but we'll see how it plays out in this game as the skirmishing begins, and I'm just going to sit back and wait and relax, do a bit of stretching, maybe stay hydrated, because this game's gonna last a while, guys. Unless there's a huge misplay from VR Caradoc, it's gonna be it's gonna take a while, because this ammunition has to be used up. Potentially expecting a tree blob, indeed. Although I'm not sure how well this build would have done versus a tree blob. It seems like more so it's just focusing on running the Wood Elves out of ammunition, which I don't think is impossible. There is a potential win condition here where these Marauder Horsemen manage to save their ammunition, and then all the Wood Elf cavalry just have to eat javelins for the rest of the game. That's a potentially very good win condition for the Chaos here. Now we are seeing this mobile force over here taking into the forest for safety, but they are just maneuvering around over here. The Chaos Infantry is advancing. They are getting kited out, and they're just continuing to move forwards at the moment. The let's see here, Marauder Horsemen are advancing, but at the moment they can't really do too much to really prevent a lot of damage. And the Sisters of Twilight are getting in quite a bit of heat onto these Marauder Horsemen with their shotgun attacks, actually pounding them down quite a bit here. Awakening of the Wood does drop too. That means these Marauder Horsemen are slowed down, and they could potentially get caught out. That would be quite bad for them. Glade Riders do charge in, and it looks like they will be catching a lot of the Marauder Horsemen here. Actually, quite a bit of them taking some damage. And the Glade Riders, they do manage to disengage before taking too much heat themselves. Sisters of Twilight using the majority of their ammunition on these Marauder Horsemen. Actually, will have less for Archaon, but potentially that's not really a worry for VM's Caradoc here. The Sisters of Twilight, with their healing, will be able to do decent work against Archaon. So I'm wondering if they really need to snipe him out in this situation. As for the Glade Riders, they have used a good amount of their ammunition, and that means we will be entering the mid game soon, where we'll be taking stock of the Chaos Infantry Corps. They do have a lot of infantry, Chaos Warriors, and Mirror Guard, all at very high HP. Sisters of Twilight, though, they will be able to push back some Marauder Horsemen, but oh no, a few of them actually do manage to come back. Will they get terror routed again? Seems like it is on cooldown, but there we go. They actually do manage to escape. Pulling away, their leadership does come back, and that's a very nice win for Chaos at the very least. But at the moment, balance of power, very Wood Elf favored. And with these guys just being Chaos Marauders, they're likely going to get cycle charged quite a bit by the cavalry. I don't expect them to be doing too well in that situation. Now the forces of the Wood Elves, they are retreating, pulling out and away, kiting into the forest, completely fine. Sylvan Knights and Stag Knights completely untouched by the forces of Chaos. They are sitting nice and comfortably, and we are seeing a pretty solid kite game working out for VM's Caradoc right now. He's so far been able to pick away at most of the skirmishers for Chaos, and as soon as those guys are down, he has more or less free reign, taking what damage he can to right now with these Glade Riders, picking away at these Chaos Marauders, just bouncing in and out, getting in as much value as they can, but still getting a bit of damage on themselves. However, still trading out quite effectively. These Chaos Marauders, they're on the verge of terror routing off, but it looks like they just barely keep it together. A small win for Chaos. Meanwhile, over here, the avoidance game continues, as most of the value is going down over here. A nice volley does pick apart at the Sisters of Twilight, but what is the name of the game here? It's all about efficiency, all about those minor trades back and forth, and these Glade Riders, they do have insane range compared to the Horsemen. Almost double, actually, but their ammunition is beginning to run low. Will it matter, though? Sisters of Twilight land Terror Route one of those Marauder Horsemen. They could potentially be chased off the battlefield, but definitely not a guarantee. Fireball coming in on the Sisters of Twilight too, but will they take off? Oh my goodness, they don't take off. The fireball sails right over their head. Potentially the slight slope in the hill making the fireball not work as well. Of course, running down hills does allow you to dodge fireballs, and that might have played a part there, but still surprising every time I see it. Now these Glade Riders, they are using the rest of their ammo. Actually shooting at Chaos Marauders a bit inefficient. Sisters of Twilight though will be handling this job easily with their shotgun blasts. It's very effective against Marauder Horsemen, and it seems like they will be out of the battlefield before really getting too much value. The Marauder Horsemen here get finished off by Glade Riders, and now I would say Biblington is going to be sweating a few bullets at this point in time. This is not a great situation for Chaos, I gotta say. Of course, big plays can still be made. Archaon, Chaos Knights with lances. But look at that. It begins the reckoning. The cycle charging of the cavalry onto the infantry will be starting with some nice Doomfire Warlock death animations as of the most recent patch. Just ignore it. And now the second cavalry force of the Wood Elf player, VM Caradoc, does move in. He'll likely be getting his ammunition shooting soon enough, but just finishing to chase off these Marauder Horsemen first. This will give him a bit more micro to actually use his ammo more efficiently. If his attention is split between here and these Glade Riders, it's going to be a little bit worse for sure. Now, these Glade Riders, they do move in to try and chase off the Horsemen, but they disengage. They do not want to be fighting that formation, as it is a little bit scary. These Chaos Knights with lances would surely tear these guys apart if given the opportunity. So a safe disengage instead, and opting for cycle charging once again with the cavalry. The Marauders, they take another charge. They don't trade for too much damage, but they kill a couple cavalry forces. Sisters of Twilight too, looking for targets to hit. It seems like Fire at Will is currently off, and they're actually taking a little bit of javelin fire, just a tiny poking, so nothing really life-threatening at the moment. This matchup is rough. Chaos versus Coast is rough too, yeah. Chaos, they really do have a hard time catching rushes without really... Yeah, they really need to dedicate quite a bit of their build to catch a rush. Now, Flaming Sword of Ruin does drop on the Marauders, but a nice pull away from Caradoc does actually keep his Sylvan Knights alive. Two of them do get bogged down, but they may still escape anyways. There you go, one of them gets out of there, and that's just because the units will have a hard time actually targeting the Sylvan Knight and killing it. So, actually a really nice Sylvan Knight stag charge. Uses up 8 winds of magic and gets a solid charge too. That's definitely very good, but potentially a good play here. Chasing away the Glade Riders. It looks like these Chaos Knights, they wanted to catch them, but the Glade Riders, they do manage to disengage. Pretty nice for Caradoc, although you will need to start using ammunition eventually, just to make sure that the game actually does draw to a close, and it looks like he will be choosing to fire at the Chaos Knights with lances. Now, Glade Riders, they don't have a lot of AP, they won't be getting in that much damage, but they essentially don't have too many targets anyways, and this is the most expensive unit, so it's not the worst case scenario here. The Chaos of Biblington, it is going to be advancing, continuing to try and use up the ammunition of the Wood Elves here, and just hoping, praying every night that one day his Chaos forces will be able to find a fight that isn't just a nasty cycle charge. He does bring in his cavalry here to prevent a charge on this flank, but the other flank is still fairly exposed. Some more shots could come in, moving on into the forest, aggressively so, to try and chase off these units. But if they just sit back tight into the forest, well, he'll need to make sure that his forces are positioned accordingly. Now, the Wood Elves, they do opt for an engagement here, charging into these Chaos Marauders. We'll be picking a few off, but in return, Burning Head does drop. Oh, but misses Biblington. Another 10 winds magic lost. Forced engagement here, though. Chaos Marauders, they do get charged in by the Glade Riders, and they actually do begin to trade well. Glade Riders staying a little bit too long, and they will have to pull away at this point in time. Meanwhile, the Chaos forces sitting tight in the forest. A little bit of a sketchy situation here, but the Wood Elves are engaging on this side too, and picking off at Chaos Marauders. Just getting in a little bit of damage. Nothing too crazy going on. Actually, the Chaos is beginning to start trading effectively now, since they are actually able to find some melee engagements, but we'll see if it's actually good enough here. At this point, some Chaos Warriors actually get surrounded, but if you look at the cavalry, it's all fairly cheap. These guys, they don't have a ton of AP, and they don't do a lot of damage to Chaos Marauders, actually having to disengage just to avoid these Chaos Knights with lances. If you look at the more expensive Wood Elf units, the Stag Knights have actually taken a couple losses at this point, and quite a bit of damage. So we'll see if they start to go down, because if it's just Glade Riders at the end of the game, I don't think the Wood Elves will really be too comfortable here, as just yeah, I don't think they'll be too comfortable taking up so many fights against Chaos, because even though cycle charging is strong, it's not the most powerful thing in the world. Now Biblington, he has started to defend his flanks around here, mostly out of the forest. This does actually spread him a bit thin, and the Sisters of Twilight looks like they will be able to terror out one of these Chaos Marauder units. These guys just disengaging from the Chaos Knights, but oh boy, oh my goodness, really picking a big play here. The Glade Riders with Hagbane tips, they do actually pull the Chaos Knights out of position, and that allows a huge charge here to rout off most of these Chaos units. Actually, 3 units of Marauders routed off in a single play, and that brings the Wood Elf advantage fairly well in their favor. Fat heal too, on top of these Stag Knights, getting in very good value. And unless these Chaos Knights can really start punishing the forces of the Wood Elves here, it's gonna get pretty scary. Sisters of Twilight too, just sitting tight and comfortable in the air, saving their ammunition for a better day and just focusing on the cycle charges. Now, Sisters of Twilight, it looks like they're on the hunt once again, flying over, potentially posing a threat for Archaon. They have turned, and no, going for shotgun on these Chaos Knights, taking out 2 models on the first volley. Just generally being pretty efficient. It looks like they'll likely be able to take out at least an entire unit of Chaos Knights, but they only have 5 ammo left. That would probably just take out this one model of Chaos Knights if they completely focus them down. That would likely be enough. Yeah, this is a pretty rough experience for Chaos, but it's not the end yet. We have seen boxes do fairly well in the late game with enough elite infantry. However, it's looking pretty scary. A little bit of a botched charge though on these Chaos Warriors. These Glade Riders don't do a ton of damage here. And it looks like the Chaos Warriors, they will actually be trading out fairly well. Still though, for the price of the Glade Riders and the fact that they don't have any more targets really, it's not the worst charge in the world. Sisters of Twilight too, just getting in tons of damage on those Chaos Knights, and they still have ammunition left. It's definitely very rough, and the Glade Riders, they do fire in onto the Chaos Knights. The new arrow rework does allow more shots to get further into the forest than before. And there we go, only a few of the missiles getting interrupted. Although actually a decent amount at the end of the volley allows these Chaos Knights to do fairly well for themselves. Archaon also camping out in the forest. And although I do say camping, whether or not it's a defensive formation is something to be debated at another time, as the Wood Elf forces, they do come in for another charge, trying to finally dislodge these Chaos Warriors, and just not really doing too effectively. They pull out again, but they are slowly whittling them down. Much bigger though is this play here with these Stag Knights cycle charging in and out, and they do a lot more damage to the Chaos Warriors. Just pummeling them down, one of them on the verge of routing off, and the magic damage does drop, but the Sylvan Knights stay out of range. definitely a good trade. Glade Riders do get caught and finished off. May even get shattered, but not a huge loss for the Wood Elves. Meanwhile, over here, some more infantry trading into the Glade Riders, but very, very slowly. These Glade Riders have survived much longer than I would have expected, given how much the Chaos has actually done. Or like, yeah, despite the Glade Riders have survived fairly long, despite how much damage I would have expected the Chaos Infantry to do. Archaon 2 recharges on in, gets a little bit of poke damage, but nothing to write home about. Conqueror of Worlds Archaon just not really having a good day today, as the Stag Knights do charge in, but oh, look at this. A counter charge from the Swords of Chaos. No magic damage, so they don't get that much damage in. But they do begin to pick off a couple of these Stag Knights. Still, nothing huge though. And a Burning Head does drop. Will it be able to catch the Glade Riders? A little bit, but honestly not too much damage. Possibly Fireballs might have been a better option here, but let's not judge the players just yet. As the Chaos Knights do come in, a potential surround could come on. Stag Knights charge the Mirror Guard, take care of that elite infantry unit, but the Swords of Chaos are a little bit out of position now. Their leadership is low, and it looks like they may even be breaking as a huge charge of the Glade Riders does come in. The Stag Knights come in and they go for a disengage actually, but potentially for a swift cycle charge, not even needed. However, as the Chaos Knights, they do get routed off. And now the Wood Elf forces, it's just come down to, or for the Chaos, it's just come down to these two pockets of infantry, and the breath attack does drop and bring the Mirror Guard down to near Terror Route leadership. They do have immune to psychology, however, so they will be staying in the battle just a little bit longer, but the Wood Elf forces have secured a pretty dominating position at this point. Archaon does give a huge slap to the Sisters of Twilight, but they manage to disengage safely nonetheless. And with this current setup, it appears that the Wood Elves will be securing a fairly strong victory here, as the kite game finally does come to an end. With the Chaos forces getting routed off, it is just Archaon left in this situation. And although single entities are very strong, their DPS output is actually surprisingly low against multi-model units. Let's see, FNG's in chat saying this is the worst experience for Chaos. You're basically the AI in someone else's game, essentially. But there are many tactics you can use to be a little bit more efficient than the AI. Nevertheless, you're mostly chasing a target that you cannot catch. And with that, the Wood Elves clean up the rest of the Chaos forces here. And that will likely be army losses very soon. It really depends on how well Archaon does here. With the Sisters of Twilight at basically full HP. The Sylvan Knights at full HP, and the Stag Knights somewhere, possibly not at full HP, nope, basically full HP. Archaon, it's almost impossible for him to kill all of them, unless possibly the Wood Elf player here, Caradoc, intentionally allows his units to get hit without attacking back. That's likely not going to happen, and honestly, I would expect a draw more likely with the battle timer running out than that to happen. But here we go, Sisters of Twilight, they position, they breath attack, and they sacrifice their own infantry, their own cavalry, just to get the breath attack on Archaon. Perhaps it was worth it. He is the bringer of the end times, but there we go, our final surround does take him out. Sisters of Twilight mocking him, flying in a spiral sort of pattern to land on top of him. They don't even attack, and Archaon routes off, just due to the terror of that sight. What a grind indeed, Bubba, what a grind indeed. The poor Marauder Horsemen getting absolutely dominated by the Sisters of Twilight, who killed about a quarter of the Chaos forces. Blade Riders took out another quarter, the Stag Knights took out the third, and the basic Glade Rider spears helping to push the army into army losses. Essentially, that being it. Archaon, despite using so much Winds of Magic, just not paying for himself. That's going to be Caradoc getting in the next victory, which brings us into the final map of the tournament. It's gonna be my favorite. Just kidding, it's Langui, the Bretonnian map, with some interesting forests between both armies. Gee, map set. So Langui, an interesting map when it comes to forest camping. Surprisingly enough, a map where you don't see forest camping that often, but it's definitely can be a problem case from time to time. Basic archers with chaos doesn't have. Yeah, chaos doesn't have basic archers, unfortunately. For some reason, the Norskin hunters they only rely on javelins. You know, arrows apparently not an effective tool for hunting in the northern chaos wastes. We may never know why, but that is how the cookie crumbles. For chaos, though, I think a full-on cavalry kite build was definitely very rough there, and not having as much elite infantry, going for more chaff, really did not pay off well. We saw how well the Chaos Warriors held in that situation and how quickly the Chaos Marauders ended up routing off. As Chaos, yeah, bring 8 dogs, 6 skirmishers, warp chicken, silver shields everywhere, and that will more or less be a much more effective tool if you want to do well. Otherwise, it's gonna be pretty rough for sure. Probably the stuff you would be hunting is too big to be taken down by a flimsy bow, says William. I really do wonder. Mammoths, if you have bows and arrows, like you know, let's say elephants of today. Can you take an elephant down with bows and arrows? I guess it might take a long time. People did use javelins in the past to take down large game. Arrows more so being for medium game. So perhaps, but truly, does Norska have no rabbits? They are a pest. They can live almost anywhere. I would imagine Norskins would have small game. But perhaps there are no deer in the lands of Norska either. Who knows? Everything could just be horribly mutated to the point where you really do just need javelins all the time. But getting so close to these creatures is pretty scary. And we have seen the high elves can pretty effectively take down mammoths with arrows, but I think that's more of a gameplay thing than a lore thing. In the Chaos Wastes, the arrow will shoot. The arrow you shoot will probably become a snake and slither off. Are trees resistant to the forces of chaos? These are the important lore questions that we must ask ourselves. Perhaps someone should contact Lore Master of Sotek about it. Rabbitman roster reveal when? Spoilers, man. Spoilers. Are you trying to get me kicked out of CA's group? But enough fooling around. It seems like we do have a final pick here. The Dark Elves, the Bretonnians, and the Greenskins selected by Caradoc, banning Lizardmen. Biblington going for a Greenskin counterpick, followed by a Dark Elf selection. Gonna be Greenskins versus Dark Elves. Now, this matchup is famously hated by Ice Power. Yes, Ice Power, one of the most proficient Dark Elf players out there. If he says this matchup is rough for Dark Elves, it most likely is. So Caradoc is definitely going to have an uphill battle to win here. But it really depends on how comfortable these players are with these factions, as skill level in a matchup will have a fairly large impact. Norska is just mammoths, obviously, and skin wolves. Don't forget about skin wolves. And Norskin rabbits would be like Monty Python. That'd be terrifying. Oh my goodness. For anyone who's seen that, or who hasn't seen that, just look it up. Close the stream right now. Look up Monty Python rabbit. I think most of my audience actually is of the older generation, so most of you guys should know about it. It's really nice because it means that people in chat are generally more civil than a lot of other YouTube audiences and Twitch audiences. So Thank you very much, guys, for, I guess, I don't know, being older. I don't know how to phrase this. Let's go back to chat. Trees can indeed be infected by chaos. Terrifying. Trees in the chaos wastes apparently bleed something. Oh dear. Well, I don't know how javelins would make it more resistant though, but that is pretty spooky. Gotta be careful. But it seems like they more or less make do with making structures out of wood. So perhaps not too terrifying. You would love a tiny single entity monster rabbit feasting on Bretonian knights. Oh my goodness. How has that not been done yet? That's just awesome. Can someone contact Tariff? I need him to make a a meme video where you replace the rabbit with, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like a skin wolf is close, but just barely not there. Skin wolves are too big. However, we've seen the Kislev roster reveal, right? Speaking of small single entity monsters that can bounce around and kill things, I think that big cat unit that Kislev is going to get is going to be terrifying. It's essentially a ground manticore, right? It's extremely small, mobile, and can work its way in between units. That seems like it should be pretty good. If it's cheap too, it's a manticore that's just cheaper. That sadly does not have flying, but should still be pretty scary. Human hunting historically was mostly just running down animals to exhaustion. And then, and then just cutting them up at that point. I think I heard about that somewhere, so yeah. For those of you guys who do say that, who do feel like humans just don't have any superpowers compared to other animals, we do have the superpower of endurance. So while we cannot win in a quick fight, humans are indeed a race of skirmishers. So perhaps Warhammer reflecting that with the skirmisher meta. But yes, we can run enormous distances compared to other animals who are primarily sprinters. And despite what most people are like nowadays, running marathons is our specialty. Were-Rabbit DLC for Norska, that would be a good Norscan DLC. I feel like they would be able to use that very effectively. Give it extra effectiveness versus Bretonia, and they're more or less set. But enough tomfoolery. The map is now loading in. We can go ahead and dive into the final match of today. This was a fairly long tournament despite there only being 4 players, just due to how I played it out. So honestly, I'm pretty excited to go grab some food. As per usual, with all my tournaments, I generally start getting pretty hungry towards the end. So hopefully this is not a 20-minute kite game. But if it is, it should be interesting. Now for the builds of both players. VM Caradoc on the Wood Elves, on the Dark Elf side, has bought an interesting Dark Elf army. A lot of elite units, 2 Witch Elves, 2 Sisters of Slaughter, 5 Spear units to back them up, some Dark Rider Cavalry, very standard, and a Supreme Sorceress of Fire. Also, this is Beastmen, this is not Greenskins. I mixed up my picks and counter picks, but nevertheless, an Ice Power-esque build, but without Marathi. A Supreme Sorceress of Fire and a Manticore with 3 Scourge Runner Chariots to support. Maybe less ice power than I would have thought. It's a little bit of a skirmish, a little bit of elite infantry, which I really wonder how well they will do versus interesting Beastmen build. Quad Ungor Raiders. Gore Herd ×4. Yep, ×4. Yes, indeed. And some Ungor Spearmen indeed. 2 units of cavalry. 2 times Razor Gore Herd being taken, a Gorbel and Malagor the Dark Omen. And what is this? Is this a defensive formation in the forest? Oh my goodness. Biblington, for the final match of today, has gone for the cheesiest build he could think of. 2 Cygors in the forest. And that's gonna be it. Just plopping them down in the forest. Defensively. but unprotected by any other unit. And here we go. We are seeing a little bit of protection. The Ungor Raiders are going to be placed in the forest. And now we're going to have to determine whether or not his positioning is 50% in the forest or not. Perhaps Biblington will make it easy for us and have a significant amount of units outside of the forest, or perhaps he will go heavier and just have tons of units in the forest. Now, for these 4 Gore herd, this one is more or less out of the forest. The rules do say that touching the forest does count, but let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units are in the forest. These 2 are mobility, so they don't count. For the units outside the forest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's pretty clear that whether or not this counts as being in the forest, most of them are outside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So it basically lines up. So Biblington has gone for a forest army that is 50% in the forest. We counted it. And it's 6 and 6, but it treads the line very closely. If Biblington moved any more units in, it would be illegal. And of course, the Dark Elves are far enough away where he has to advance anyways. But he will likely be keeping the Sigors in the forest. And that's going to be making things pretty dicey for his Dark Elf opponent here, Caradoc. Sigors will be throwing their rocks initially. The first one exits out of the forest. The second one goes to, and for the first hit, oh, a really nice dodge from the Sisters of Slaughter. Second dodge from the Witch Elves. Caradoc showing he does have a very good micro here, at least for dodging in the early stages of the game. And the second boulder comes in, but he is really keeping on top of dodging these boulders. Some nice play, and this will be preventing all of the damage on the advance. But the big question, will the Sigors be able to get a lot of damage in once the battle gets going? They're very protected, a lot more than usual, and this could go very well for Biblington. Skirmish phase 2 hasn't really had a lot play out truly, as the Scourge Runners are more or less just taking a safe further path, and now they are getting into position. They may very well decide to plow through some of this infantry here. There are very few spears, but remember, the Eye of Morsliev does have a net and snare ability that can pin down the Scourge Runners. So if they get too close, they could run into a little bit of trouble. As for the Dark Elf infantry, it seems like spears are engaging first, but they will lose to the Gore herd without support. We'll see how well that goes. They actually do tank the first volley of archer fire though, which is exactly what Caradoc wants. He waits for the volleys to come down before sending in his infantry, and they will be quite protected as the main engagement actually drops. These Scourge Runners, they do get netted, and a rock flies in, but hits the Ungor Spearman herd instead, and they're actually on the verge of routing off. As for the Scourge Runners, they're now shooting at the Razor Gore herd, who are beginning to get compromised, and the Sigors, despite being pretty well protected, it's not looking too good for the Beastmen infantry line. The elite Dark Elf infantry is just swarming in on top of them. And now we're going to see the Ungor Raiders are going to get compromised here. The Scourge Runners are still alive, and the Manticore has decided to drop down onto the Sigor to try and get some damage in. But the Razor Gore, waiting in the forest, bounce on top of them and will be surrounding the Manticore, stopping it from killing the Sigor, and actually looks like the Razor Gores will kill it. But the big problem here is all this Dark Elf infantry. I'm not confident that the Beastmen will be able to take them out, but we will have to see. Over here, the Scourge Runners actually getting pretty good damage on Malagor, or perhaps Fireball or something else. But they will be going down eventually to the Scorball. A nice pick for the Beastmen. Over here on the right flank, most of the infantry is gone. And now the Sisters of Slaughter in the forest against Razor Gore herd. They're going to be doing quite well in this situation. Supreme Sorceress to Fire 2, getting into the mix to help chase off these Ungor Spearmen. And this is looking pretty rough for the forces of the Beastmen. A nice AoE drop onto those witch elves almost entirely takes them out. But surprisingly enough, because of the Dark Elf passive, they do manage to stay in the fight. And here we go, this Cygor is now getting shut down. We'll be nearly routing off to the Witch Elves, it seems, and if not that, the Spearmen, surely. And it seems like the last pocket of Beastmen is over here in this forest position. And they are allowed to stay in the forest under the current forest rule set for this tournament. And they will have whatever advantages they can pull from there. But if you just take a look, all of these forces are infantry. The fight is more or less even, the same as it would be if this was fought in an open field. And with the Manticore even managing to survive the Razor Gore herd coming back, it looks like this Gorbel, surrounded, will likely be going down. Another huge AoE drops, but it doesn't bring the balance of power back. And Malagor the Dark Omen too, taking a huge fireball to the face. Another, I think, Vile Tide drops. But this is looking like a very strong Dark Elf victory here. Just going in heavy on the elite infantry and timing the engages really well. It's looking like it will be pulling the Beastmen apart. Scourge shots go in, and we do see the force come into effect a bit. The Scourge shots do prevent the forces from taking a lot of hits from the ranged abilities, but as the Scourge Runners move up, they will now be able to hit the Cygor, and it's getting very low on HP now. Now more spells are dropping. The infantry is taking a lot of damage, but another fireball drops on Malagor, and that's going to be army losses for the Beastmen. And Clan VM Caradoc coming on in, taking the victory for today. More contested victory than the other matches that we had. Definitely very exciting. Quite a long series, but we got there. And that's gonna be it, despite the forest camping from Biblington. It just definitely was not enough to deal with this Dark Elf build. If you look at his Gore herd, they got destroyed. Very little value for those guys. And the Ungor Raiders got very little shortly after. The Cygors, despite being fairly well protected from missiles, ended up getting engaged on by infantry. That was essentially the doom of the Beastmen. Scourge Runners getting fairly low value, makes sense for the state of the game. And that's gonna be it. Indeed, big props for Biblington for going for some forest shenanigans. But sadly, it was not enough. GG's. Redoc. I'll send the fries soon enough. Oh my gosh, and Bubba's Big Blast. Thank you so much coming in for the $10 donation. Congratulations, you are now the sponsor of today's tournament. Funding both prizes for today. It is hugely appreciated, and well played to all the players of today. I think it was an interesting forest rules test. I wish it could have been bigger, but it was interesting just to see how players sort of reacted initially to the forest rules. It seems like it didn't devolve immediately into some forest camping, but I don't think the games that we had was a substantial enough set to be super conclusive about our opinions. Bubba's Big Blast coming in with the donation too, saying that was some impressive Dark Elf play. I think so, especially with the dodging and the timing of the infantry engagement. I think that was just absolutely slick. So GG's. I will go ahead and tap out. I think, yeah, well, I'll have to see if I can actually send Caradoc the prize pool, but if you're in the stream, I will. And for everyone on stream today, thank you very much for tuning in. Expect some videos coming out in the future and possibly another forest tournament later in the day on another weekday. So with all that out of the way, I will wait for the YouTube stream to catch up. Then we can close the tournament.